Hirasawa Kazuki is introduced as an ordinary university student, living a standard life, suddenly receiving a dire notice about his impending destruction in 8 years. Appearing now as a young boy standing amidst a group of diverse individuals, staring into a mirror with utter confusion at his new reflection, touching the glass as he wonders how he ended up in this state, noticing spilled water and crushed lilies as someone demands accountability, witnessing a woman holding him while bowing in deep apology to a nobleman, watching a servant girl recoil in terror from harsh verbal abuse, observing the woman's desperate pleas for forgiveness while she shields him, realizing with a start that this entire situation mirrors a specific game event, recalling the fantasy RPG Brave Hearts and its hero named Liner, remembering the exhilarating battle system and various character skills, thinking of the beautiful dialogues and hidden dungeons he explored countless times, acknowledging his deep addiction to the game and his perfect memory of its script, identifying Hayden as the stern head of the powerful Stokes family, recognizing Jessica as the cold and unforgiving wife by his side, looking at the servant Clara, who appears frightened and broken, questioning why these fictional characters are moving and interacting in his reality, standing amidst a depressing scene as the manor's atmosphere grows heavy, identifying this flashback event as the moment Harold Stokes executes the heroine's mother. Jessica holds the young boy while the tense atmosphere of the Stokes manor thickens, her cold profile revealing a complete lack of empathy for the unfolding scene. Harold stares down at his hands in a state of dazed shock and confusion, his body jolting as he begins to grasp the gravity of his situation. A look of pure horror crosses his face while he tries to process the event. The realization of his new identity hits him with overwhelming force as he freezes, standing rooted to the spot while Jessica maintains her firm grasp on him. Hayden grips the hilt of his sword and prepares to strike down the servant. Harold's feet instinctively begin to move across the floor as he intervenes. The nobleman raises his blade to execute the cowering woman with a shout. Colette collapses in a fit of sobbing as she awaits the final blow. Harold suddenly calls out for his father to stop before the blade falls. Noticing with a start that his body is moving entirely on its own, Hayden pauses his swing to ask his son about his sudden interference. Harold explains that he wants to use the servant as a training dummy. A villainous smirk plays on his lips as he speaks with chilling cruelty. The head of the house finds the boy's cold-hearted proposal quite amusing. A guard steps forward to drag the weeping woman away to the dungeons. Hayden watches her go while expressing his deep disdain for her heritage. Jessica coldly concludes that the servant will serve well for Harold's magical experiments. Harold stands between his parents while they discuss the fate of the servant. A bead of sweat rolls down his forehead as he maintains his facade. His small hand trembles slightly while he fights against his body's automatic responses. Harold later leans against a wall in private to process his situation. He remembers the game's description of Harold Stokes as a heinous villain. A vision of the powerful Eustace and his fated demise haunts his mind. He wonders if he is merely witnessing a vivid and realistic dream. Clutching his chest, the boy struggles to accept his new identity. He reflects on his past life as a simple university student. Harold rests his chin on his hand while pondering the path ahead. A sharp series of knocks suddenly echoes through the quiet room. He clenches his fist and gives the order for the visitor to enter. The heavy door opens as a figure steps into the room. Harold realizes with a start that his voice is acting independently. A dignified butler in a suit bows respectfully to his young master. The boy identifies the man as Norman, a person of high moral character. He recalls Norman's nickname as the sole conscience of the Stokes family. The butler steps closer to ask Harold for a moment of his time. Norman stares intently at the young boy with a searching expression. The old man asks with genuine concern if the boy is feeling unwell. Harold turns his head slightly while Norman suggests leaving him alone for a short while. The boy snaps back that he is perfectly fine despite his visible and growing distress. Norman remains unconvinced as he carefully observes the young master's pale and sweaty complexion. Harold raises his voice again to reiterating that there is absolutely nothing wrong with him. He inwardly curses the mouth that keeps translating his internal thoughts into arrogant insults. The butler stands in a surprised silence, while noting Harold's unusual lack of overt complaints. Norman finally finds the courage to request a lighter punishment for the servant named Clara. A memory of the woman's sorrowful face flashes through Harold's mind as he listens. He realizes he must do everything in his power to save her from her fate. The fear of his automatic speech patterns sabotaging his true intentions weighs heavily on him. Harold hesitates while pondering the long-term consequences of altering the game's established timeline. A vision of the game's main heroine, Colette suddenly appears in his troubled thoughts. He worries that rescuing Clara will cause a massive deviation from his meeting with Laner. A gruesome image of Clara burning to death from his own magic haunts his conscience. He recalls how Colette was supposed to be exiled before meeting the story's true protagonist. Harold views his own future as a path leading towards certain and absolute darkness. He searches for a way to improve his image without breaking the world's logic. The boy clenches his teeth while desperate to avoid the death flags waiting for him. He concludes that he must guide the story toward a safer result without changing major events. Harold fixes his gaze forward with a new and dangerous sense of determination. Norman stares in shock at the young master's sudden change in demeanor. Harold demands to know if he is being told to save the servant. The butler recoils slightly as the boy's harsh voice rings through the room. Harold frets inwardly about his rising hate points and failing social standing. Norman asserts that the boy should act first if he wants to help Clara. The young noble retorts that he will hear the rest of the story later. He barks in order for the butler to hurry up and leave. Norman offers a final bow of gratitude before making a swift exit. Harold sits in solitude on his bed as the door clicks shut. He exhales a heavy breath while trying to process his complicated situation. Collapsing onto the mattress, he wonders if his actions were far too hasty. He admits to himself how exhausting it is to avoid worsening his reputation. The possibility of returning to his own world through death briefly crosses his mind. He quickly shakes his head to dismiss the suicidal thought as too risky. He remains still for a moment while staring blankly into the distance. Suddenly, he rummages through his belongings with a sense of renewed urgency. He springs from the bed to pull out hidden items from his storage. A collection of heavy books and a tied scroll spill onto the floor. Harold inspects a familiar potion bottle and a red marble from the game. He discovers that the magic manuals are written in Japanese and realizes he can read them. Harold sits amongst his research materials and decides to stick to the game script to survive, scrutinizing his books to confirm if this reality truly aligns with the game he knows. He prepares himself for the next step of his precarious journey. Putting on his coat and setting out to acquire a vital trump card for his survival, various figures from his new life gather under the blooming cherry blossom trees. Strolling through the mansion grounds, he heads toward a specific destination with an escort. His boots strike the pavement with a sense of purpose and determination. He reaches a tall stone dungeon and inquires about the current status of the prisoners. Ordering his guard to remain outside and ensure that no one else enters the tower, bursting into the guardroom, he catches a sentry off guard during his break. The startled soldier tumbles backward upon realizing the young master has arrived unannounced. Harold commands the flustered man to stay put while he enters the cells alone. The guard remains slumped on the floor in a state of confused submission. Navigating a dark corridor, the boy approaches a cell illuminated by a faint light. He addresses the woman inside and asks for her name to confirm her identity. The prisoner gazes at him with wide, trembling eyes as she recognizes her visitor. Crossing his arms, he informs her that he has come to discuss a serious matter. She grips her apron tightly while memories of past events flicker through her mind. Looking up with a look of pure bewilderment, she waits for his next words. He leans in and asks her to reveal the members of her family. The prisoner reveals that she has only one daughter, prompting the young master to immediately inquire about the girl's name. She softly responds that her child is named Colette. He then asks what has become of the rest of her kin. She explains her estrangement and her husband's death from illness 3 years prior. Standing with arms crossed, he realizes why Colette has no other living relatives. The boy continues by asking the child's age and her familiarity with magic. He notes to himself that these details align perfectly with the game's original plot. Feeling certain about the future, he considers his next moves to be fully finalized. As he dismisses her and prepares to depart, she desperately begs him to wait. She cries out that her daughter will be left entirely alone if she dies. Reaching out, she implores him to take care of the child after her execution. Tears fall as she frantically insists that her little girl has done nothing wrong. Harold looks back at her with a stern and unforgiving expression. He calls her unsightly as she remains slumped on the cold prison floor. He mocks her for being seized by a meaningless fear and for her foolishness. The prisoner gazes at him with wide, tearful eyes, confused by his harsh words. Turning his back on her, he begins to walk away from the cell. His footsteps resonate through the dark corridor as he leaves the dungeon behind. The massive estate looms over the horizon as he returns to his daily life. Harold reflects on his hidden sympathy as he walks through the mansion's quiet halls. He lets out a resigned sigh, lamenting how his harsh tone undermines his true intentions. Catching his attention, Norman approaches and calls out to the young master. The boy turns to greet the butler, noticing the man is carrying various documents. Pointing toward the scrolls, Harold inquires about the nature of the materials Norman holds. Norman presents a detailed map of the Stokes territory, along with information on local settlements. Inside a well-furnished room, the two sit together to discuss a plan for the servant. Looking quite solemn, the butler prepares to share a difficult piece of advice. He proposes relocating the prisoner to a land far beyond the reach of the Stokes family. A flicker of surprise crosses Norman's face as Harold brings up the loss of taxpayers. Harold stares coldly, declaring that the economic consequences are of no importance to him. The butler realizes that safety from his own family's influence is indeed the top priority. From his seat on the couch, Harold demands to know the location of a promising town. Norman indicates Bloche village on the map. Noting that the Liner family resides there, Harold considers the high probability of the key story characters meeting in that specific location. Shifting his focus, the boy asks about the freedom of movement between different noble territories. Norman clarifies that commoners face few restrictions, though they need basic resources to survive. Harold lists the necessary expenses, including a travel permit and a wagon for the daughter. As he reviews the paperwork, a brief silence falls between the master and his servant. The elder man wonders to himself if Harold is actually more compassionate than his cruel parents. Norman watches his young master closely, realizing that the boy possesses a surprisingly compassionate nature. As he observes Harold meticulously studying documents regarding the welfare of the local commoners, the butler reconsiders Harold's previous cruel outbursts, wondering if they were merely a calculated facade. He questions whether the boy's apparent apathy was actually a hidden desire to save the innocent. Fueled by this new understanding, Norman resolves to support Harold's secret plans with absolute loyalty. His thoughts briefly drift to the elitist Hayden Stokes and his wife, who view commoners as tools. Returning to the map, the servant suggests a town where the woman could find seasonal work. Harold quickly counters the proposal, pointing out the high living expenses that would burden the worker. Norman remains silent for a moment, his respect for the young boy's foresight growing even deeper. He looks at Harold with conviction, seeing him as the true ray of hope for the Stokes lineage. A bright light transitions the scene away from the mansion as the secret meeting concludes. The next morning arrives, revealing a serene landscape of dense forests and distant mountain peaks. Venturing into the lush greenery, Harold finds a secluded spot to test his supernatural abilities. The boy takes a deep breath and steadies his nerves, feeling a mix of frustration and anticipation. Standing alone in the clearing, he begins to recite a dramatic incantation for a fire spell. He clenches his fist tightly while focusing his internal energy on the ritualistic words. With a sudden shout, Harold unleashes his magic and sends a burst of flame into the air. He stares in disbelief at the flickering embers, stunned that he managed to manifest real power. Comparing his small puff of smoke to the ideal vortex, he realizes his mastery is severely lacking. Despite the embarrassing chant and the weak result, he feels a surge of excitement about his future. Harold quickly checks himself, realizing he shouldn't let his excitement over a simple spark distract him from the task. He immediately attempts the spell again with even more vigor, determined to produce a larger blaze. Repeated impacts echo through the quiet woods as he continues his secret magical training. He focuses on the necessity of perfectly simulating a lethal inferno to ensure Clara can escape safely. Narrowing his eyes, he considers the risk of being caught if the evidence of the fire is unconvincing. Eventually, he stands back to inspect a blackened patch of earth and breathes a sigh of relief. The boy calculates that a sufficiently spectacular display of magic will make a disappearing body seem plausible. Thoughts of the real people now inhabiting this world remind him of the grave stakes involved. As the sun sets, Harold prepares for the operation with a grim expression of absolute resolve. The complex roles of the villain, hero, and heroine loom over the impending events of the story. Night falls over the mountain range, signaling the official beginning of his dangerous mission. Under the starlit sky, Harold meets with his conspirators while being observed from the dark shadows. Someone approaches the clearing with hurried steps, breaking the heavy silence of the forest night. Little Colette suddenly bursts out from the tree line, crying out for her mother in a panic. The woman turns in shock at the sound of her daughter's voice while Harold stands nearby. Without hesitation, the two rush together and collapse onto the ground in a tearful embrace. They hold each other close, momentarily forgetting the danger surrounding them in the dark woods. Harold watches the emotional reunion from several paces away, his back turned to the horses. He interrupts the tender moment to inform the mother and child that they now face a choice. Raising a single finger, he delivers the first cold option for them to simply die on the spot. Colette and her mother look on in shock at the high stakes presented. Harold holds up two fingers to introduce the second option for their future. He points toward the horizon, ordering them to leave the Stokes territory forever. The boy warns that this choice requires them to abandon all past relationships. Clara remains silent, processing the weight of the difficult decision ahead of her. She asks with hesitation if Harold truly intends to permit their safe departure. Glancing back over his shoulder, he questions her meaning with a cold gaze. The young master impatiently demands that they stop stalling and choose their fate. He bluntly explains that simply executing them would be a much easier task. The mother stares back at him with a look of intense, quiet contemplation. She finally speaks up, apologizing while affirming her will to live for Colette. Harold finds the emotional response incredibly boring and sighs with clear disappointment. Moving closer, he reaches out to fasten a specific necklace around Colette's neck. He declares that keeping the accessory on is the primary condition for escape. Startled by the sudden gift, the little girl agrees to his terms immediately. Harold instructs her to eventually pass the necklace to a man who can protect her. Colette looks up at him with a confused expression, tilting her head slightly. He crosses his arms and displays a surge of annoyance at her slow reaction. Clara repeats the instructions to her daughter to ensure the message is clear. The girl nods frantically and promises to follow the directive without fail. Harold dismisses the pair and calls for his guards to finalize the arrangements. He instructs the soldiers to escort the mother and daughter to a waiting wagon. A menacing shadow falls over his face as he threatens his men against failure. The guards tremble in fear while promising to follow every command without question. Bowing deeply, Clara and Colette express their heartfelt thanks before their departure. The two figures walk away into the distance as their journey to safety begins. Norman notes the dropping temperature and suggests that it is time to return home. Harold remains still, looking off into the horizon with a pensive gaze. The butler observes his young master with a quiet and knowing silence. Suddenly, Harold demands that Norman head back to the estate alone. He stands firm with a serious expression, signaling his need for total isolation. Norman lingers for a brief second, seemingly concerned by the abrupt dismissal. Acknowledging the order, the butler turns and leaves Harold to his thoughts. The boy stands in the middle of the darkening forest as silence falls. He reflects on the gratitude he received for his carefully calculated rescue act. A flashback reveals the clumsy accident where he fell into a muddy garden. Harold admits to himself that the incident was far from a proud moment. He decides that ensuring their safety is enough to justify his clumsy efforts. Shaking off the embarrassment, he prepares to face the challenges still ahead. The young heir readies himself to complete his final duty of the day. Norman looks down, reassuring himself that his master will eventually regain his composure. His footsteps echo softly as he continues down the path away from the forest. The butler ponders the source of Harold's apparent distress while moving further away. Stopping in his tracks, he questions if leaving the young boy alone was truly wise. A sudden movement causes the butler to plant his foot firmly on the ground. Norman whips around with a startled exclamation after hearing an unexpected noise. His eyes widen in complete shock at the sight unfolding behind him. Harold lets out a mocking laugh while covering his face with a trembling hand. The young heir declares that he will never permit such a pathetic display to continue. Norman freezes in terror as he listens to the cold threats being uttered. Harold unleashes a devastating fire spell that illuminates the dark forest with intense heat. The sound of a startled gasp escapes as footsteps retreat from the violent display. Harold sighs with frustration, realizing his body is still acting out the villain's original script. He contemplates his sadistic outburst while assuming he is finally alone in the clearing. His face pales with realization when he notices that Norman is still standing nearby. The butler bows his head and offers a sincere apology for his lingering presence. Harold closes the distance and demands that Norman take this secret to his grave. He clenches his fist while staring intensely at the butler to ensure total compliance. Norman closes his eyes and gives a submissive affirmation to the harsh order. Harold scoffs and turns his back to head home as the encounter finally concludes. Norman watches with a somber expression as he reflects on his young master's true nature. The butler observes Harold walking away, questioning why the boy desperately hides his own frailty. Narrative thoughts dwell on Harold's isolated struggle and his choice to deceive those around him. Harold stands in the shadows while his parents and the estate staff present a cheerful front. The young man's silhouette remains distant as questions arise about the depth of his internal suffering. Norman looks down at his hand, regretting his failure to recognize Harold's burden for so long. He firms his resolve, deciding that he can no longer simply brood over past mistakes. The butler vows to dedicate his remaining years to making up for a decade of silence. Harold marches forward with a clenched fist while hoping to eventually end his villainous act. The journey begins as a vast and empty horizon stretches out under the quiet morning sky. A horse-drawn wagon travels across the barren plains escorted by a group of mounted soldiers. Colette rests her head and sleeps soundly despite the rhythmic bumping of the moving carriage. The young girl remains tucked away in sleep as the group traverses the lonely landscape. Clara stares into the distance with a heavy heart while the wagon continues its journey. One of the escorting soldiers comments on Harold's strict orders to keep their mission a secret. His companion smiles while recalling Harold's unusual behavior during the previous day's preparations. The guards discuss how the young heir was personally busy organizing the horses and supplies. Harold stands before his men to deliver precise instructions for reaching their destination safely. He hands over a permit and explains that his own funds will serve as severance pay. The soldiers exchange worried glances after hearing Harold's selfless plan to sacrifice his important purchase. Harold harshly calls someone stupid, demanding they settle for a cheaper sword instead. Meanwhile, a small pouch filled with coins is held tightly within a pair of hands. As the journey continues, Clara sits quietly in the carriage while being asked if she's awake. Suddenly, the escorting soldier announces that Blush village has finally come into view. Ahead, the distant silhouette of the village emerges between the dark hills at dawn. Slowly, the carriage rolls forward as the guard suggests resting until they arrive. Turning to him, Clara smiles gently while choosing to enjoy the peaceful morning scenery. In response, the soldier offers a sympathetic look and acknowledges her quiet feelings. Nearby, the morning light begins to glisten off the damp leaves of a plant. Moments later, a burst of radiant white light fills the air as the sun rises. Soon, the brilliant sunrise fully illuminates the valley where the small village is located. Back at the estate, Harold rests peacefully in a chair beside a row of indoor planters. Inside the manor, voices express shock over a report regarding a complete cremation. Emotional, Harold's parents embrace him while praising his exceptional talent for magic. Internally, the young heir forcedly smiles while wishing his parents were more suspicious. Further reflections dwell on the deep emotional divide separating Harold from his family. Still watching the window, Harold considers his secret rescue operation to be a success. Abruptly, the quiet moment is broken when a loud greeting announces an unexpected visitor. Surprised, Zen enters the room and stops short to question what Harold is doing. Coldly, Harold orders Zen to mind his own business and shut the door. Zen walks into the room, surprised by Harold's cold greeting and asking why he is there. Smiling brightly, Zen recalls how Harold accompanied him during the night of the final full moon. Harold glares intensely and threatens to turn Zen into monster feed if he speaks further. Sweat dropping, Zen quickly agrees to remain silent as he shrinks back from the heir's threat. Turning away, Harold sighs internally while wishing for a break from the annoying intrusion. Zen watches Harold thoughtfully. Noticing that he is surprisingly not being kicked out of the room, standing behind the young master, Zen realizes Harold seems to disregard their massive difference in status. The servant feels a sense of warmth, believing Harold actually remembers his name and feels worried. Harold looks down at his notes, contemplating the most effective amount for his botanical experiment. Catching Harold's eye, Zen offers a soft and sincere smile of genuine gratitude and friendship. Zen looks at the indoor planters and asks if Harold is growing those vegetables to eat. Harold responds with a gruesome threat to feed Zen's own intestines to him instead. Ignoring the hostility, Zen critiques the breeding method, while Harold holds up a small potion bottle. Staring at the container, Harold explains he is using a life potion to experiment on the crops. Confused, Zen questions the logic of using expensive, restorative medicines on simple farm vegetables. Harold clarifies that the potion promotes plant growth to raise the potential yield of the harvest. Using a pair of scissors, Harold prepares a sample while explaining his search for a water ratio. Suddenly, Harold tosses several harvested pieces towards Zen, catching the servant completely by surprise. Blankly, Harold commands Zen to eat the raw sample as part of the testing process. Horrified, Zen makes a disgusted face while Harold tells him to blame his own careless curiosity. Zen chews on the sample and is instantly amazed by its incredible sweetness. He enthusiastically praises the taste while Harold silently notes the experiment's success. The two stand together in silence as Harold begins to contemplate the broader implications. Harold realizes he must utilize this game-breaking farming method to his full advantage. He recalls the plight of the territory's farmers suffering from disasters and high taxes. Recalling Norman's data, Harold considers the political fallout of his family's tyrannical rule. Harold resolves to mitigate potential uprisings despite his lack of affection for his lineage. He instructs Zen to bring the harvest to the kitchen for professional evaluation. Saluting with a wide grin, Zen accepts the task and prepares to depart. Harold sternly reminds the servant to keep the origin of the produce a total secret. Zen promises his absolute silence while acknowledging Harold's authority with a cheerful smile. Dismissing the servant with a final remark, Harold watches Zen prepare to exit. Alone at last, Harold looks toward the door with a lingering sense of annoyance. Walking through the hall, Zen wonders what has made his young master so driven. The setting shifts to a quiet outdoor courtyard, lined with tall hedges. Harold tightens his grip on a practice sword as he prepares for training. Standing in the center of the grounds, he assumes a focused combat stance. His eyes narrow with concentration as he anticipates a hypothetical opponent's movement. Launching into action, Harold shouts out a direction while delivering a swift horizontal strike. He quickly pivots and executes a decisive finishing blow against the empty air. Harold narrows his eyes with intense focus as he continues to sharpen his battle instincts. Taking a brief breather, he evaluates his current physical capabilities and the high stats of his body. He reflects on his character's established power in the original game, despite his cruel and villainous nature. Clenching his fist, he resolves to train until he surpasses the strength dictated by his own destiny. He acknowledges that mastery over combat is his only hope for surviving the trials of this world. An image of the future hero's party flickers in his mind as he prepares for eventual confrontation. Gazing out over the vast territory, he makes a firm vow to undergo a rigorous training regime. The narrative shifts toward the rolling hills and quiet peaks of a distant and tranquil mountain range. Sun-drenched forests give way to a peaceful valley as the perspective moves across the natural landscape. The scenery gradually transforms into a more desolate area where the ground appears weathered and dry. Bare, twisted branches stand against a heavy sky, signaling the presence of a dark and spreading blight. A sharp transition mark punctuates the shift from the wilderness to the refined halls of an estate. Within a serene Japanese-style courtyard, petals fall gently onto the wooden porch of a traditional manor. The setting moves inside to a formal room, decorated with vibrant flowers and sliding paper doors. A man dressed in traditional attire begins a grave discussion regarding the actions of the Stokes family. Several individuals seated around a low table express their deep regrets to a young girl named Erica. Erica maintains a calm and resolute expression while considering her duty to protect the Sumeragi people. An iron kettle boils quietly in the background as the assembly addresses the growing threats to their domain. A cup of tea is offered while the conversation focuses on the miasma creeping through the nearby territory. The surrounding forest reflects the devastation as reports confirm that the sickness has consumed a third of the mountain. An elder explains that the loss of their forestry industry would be a fatal blow to Sumeragi. Erica listens with a heavy heart, her expression clouding with the weight of her family's desperate situation. The man expresses profound regret over the necessity of sacrificing his own daughter for economic support. Turning her back on the conversation, Erica walks alone along the corridor as silent apologies linger. Her attendant, Yuno, watches her depart with concern, sensing the deep burden her lady carries. Erica softly requests to be left alone, needing space to process the gravity of the family's choice. She grips her kimono tightly, internally lamenting her perceived powerlessness to change their grim fate. Respecting the request, Yuno bows and accepts the order to leave her side for the moment. Standing amidst falling petals, Erica gazes into the distance with a look of quiet, tragic resolve. She accepts that her personal happiness is a small price to pay for the survival of her people. A moment of stillness passes as the focus shifts away from the Sumeragi estate. The narrative highlights the central figures involved in the unfolding political drama within the kingdom. The scene transitions into a new strategy phase, focused on the difficult task of persuasion. High windows of a grand manor look out over the grounds under a bright, cloud-flecked sky. A refined man with glasses reviews a detailed document with a sharp, analytical gaze. Harold sits across from him, inquiring if any major errors exist within the written statement. The man confirms the accuracy of the report, finding no faults in the information provided. An awkward silence settles between the two as the man waits for Harold to explain his motives. Flashing a confident smirk, Harold reassures his companion that he has no intention of causing trouble. The man responds with a look of pure confusion, unable to decipher Harold's true intentions. Harold points out that his family's finances have been steadily declining for years, highlighting his parents' lavish spending on luxury goods as the primary reason for the debt. An official notes that reliance on inheritance and high taxes is a temporary fix. Looking for a reaction, Harold asks if there is any disagreement with this dire assessment. The advisor remains silent, sweating slightly as he processes the harsh reality of the situation. Eventually, he admits that the downward trend of their economic power is undeniable. He further explains that farmers are closing down and citizens are fleeing the territory. Harold listens with a focused expression, carefully weighing the gravity of these reports. He acknowledges the emergency but notes that total collapse is not yet imminent. With a cynical chuckle, he muses that his family's downfall might actually be helpful. The official quickly warns him that such talk could be interpreted as treasonous rebellion. Shifting his focus, Harold predicts bankruptcy unless the agricultural sector yields better returns. He reveals that his guest, Jake, has been summoned specifically for his role as inspector. Jake stares back in confusion, wondering what the young lord expects of him now. Suddenly, Zen enters the room with a cheerful attitude while carrying a large woven basket. A pile of large, healthy-looking vegetables is presented directly to the stunned agricultural expert. Jake's eyes widen in absolute shock as he stares at the produce before him. Zen enthusiastically encourages the guest to sample the crops that Harold grew himself. Furious at the interruption, Harold glares at Zen and threatens to use him as fertilizer. Jake can only watch in stunned silence as he struggles to reconcile the scene. Jake looks downward with a bead of sweat on his face, feeling the pressure of the moment. Gazing at the basket of produce, he asks if Harold really grew these crops himself. The inspector reaches out with a trembling hand to pick up one of the potatoes. Jake takes a cautious bite of the raw crop to test its unusual quality. A look of sudden realization and shock flashes across his face as he tastes it. With a shout of pure astonishment, he exclaims that the vegetable is remarkably sweet. While Zen beams with pride at the success, Harold watches with a skeptical expression. Harold clarifies that the exceptional quality comes from a proprietary technique he developed. He further explains his intention to spread this specialized knowledge across the whole territory. The two men sit across from each other as Harold outlines the next steps. Looking puzzled, Jake asks why he was specifically chosen for such a monumental task. Harold notes that Jake's familiarity with the territory's finances makes him the perfect candidate. He mentions that specialized equipment will be required and asks for a cost analysis. Jake stares at the basket in a long, pensive silence while weighing the proposal. He eventually declares his willingness to assist if it truly improves the dire situation. Harold observes that it is natural to hesitate until the full story is told. With a wicked smirk, he mentions that his father would have likely imprisoned him. The expert flinches in terror at the casual mention of being sent to a dungeon. Seeing the interaction, Zen and the older servant share a light-hearted chuckle together. Harold concludes that Jake's cautious reaction is simply a natural response to the circumstances. Harold explains that having someone as simple as Zen would only increase his stress. He tells Zen to use his brain after the servant expresses his confusion. The young noble produces a small, ornate vial from his belongings. He addresses the group, promising to reveal the secret behind his agricultural success. Holding the bottle up, he identifies it as the key to his method. He introduces the concept of using life potions to significantly boost crop yields. The plan involves distributing the potions to several farmers for small-scale field tests. Harold explains that this staggered approach is meant to lower overall financial risk. He notes that small-scale trials allow them to protect farmers if something fails. Furthermore, he plans to use the Stokes family's potion reserves for the project. He reveals a crate of expired potions that are already slated for disposal. The primary advantage of this technique is the incredibly fast plant growth rate. He clarifies that while taste and size vary, the speed is consistently abnormal. A basket of vegetables illustrates how a 2-month harvest becomes a weekly one. Jake reacts with pure shock at the idea of a 5-day growth cycle. Harold warns that such efficiency could crash markets and ruin external farming communities. Behind his stoic mask, he worries about his personal safety and potential resentment. Fearing his father's greed, he discusses the risk of the method being monopolized. He proposes strict harvest limits and a slow rollout to avoid drawing attention. Eventually, he hopes to gain enough stability to experiment with other crop varieties. A heavy silence fills the room as the group processes the complexity of the presented plan. Harold suddenly snaps at his audience. demanding to know why they are staring at him so foolishly. Bowing slightly, Jake apologizes, while admitting that the sheer detail of the strategy left him stunned. The butler steps forward to voice his genuine admiration for Harold's exceptionally thorough and calculated foresight. Visibly flustered, Harold internally wonders why they are praising his amateur framework so highly. He crosses his arms and sternly warns that he needs honest advisors rather than simple yes men. Both men acknowledge his command, showing their profound respect for his strict but fair leadership style. Jake reflects on the young noble's lack of conceit despite his world-altering discovery and sharp intellect. Simultaneously, the butler observes a hidden depth of compassion and a desire to help the common people. Harold remains standing with a stoic expression, unaware of the growing loyalty he is currently inspiring. He turns to Jake and asks one final time if the man will serve as his limbs. Jake looks down at the harvested crops, contemplating the gravity of the responsibility being offered to him. Placing a hand over his heart, Jake solemnly pledges his total devotion and strength to Harold's cause. Hiding his true intentions with a smirk, Harold claims the populace is too weak to survive without him. The sun shines brightly over the sprawling and majestic stone architecture of the Stokes family estate. While enjoying a cup of tea, Harold's father casually mentions that he has arranged a marriage partner. Harold nearly chokes on his drink, his eyes widening in total shock at the sudden, unwelcome news. The identity of the bride is revealed as Erika Sumeragi, the daughter of another prominent noble family. During a formal dinner, the father explains how this union will bolster the prestige of the Stokes lineage. He concludes the announcement by stating they will travel to the Sumeragi territory in a few days. Harold leans back in his chair, processing the sudden news of his arranged engagement with a heavy sigh. He stares blankly ahead as he recalls the existence of a specific fiancée from the original game. Strategic thoughts outline the Sumeragi family's prestigious history and the political benefits of a union with them. Harold notes that despite his family's enthusiasm, the Sumeragis are likely very reluctant about the marriage deal. He envisions the young Erika Sumeragi standing solemnly while his parents discuss using her to fix finances. Regretting his lack of rest, Harold wishes he could simply focus on the new farming developments. A small, weary version of Harold sighs deeply over the unfortunate timing of this unwanted marriage talk. He suddenly realizes that the Sumeragi territory is currently plagued by the destructive effects of deadly miasma. A devious smirk plays on Harold's lips as he begins to formulate a new, opportunistic strategy. The scene shifts to the quiet, moonlit library where rows of books hold the answers he seeks. He carefully flips through a botanical guide, noting the medicinal properties of rare and exotic herbs. Sitting alone by the fire, Harold concentrates intensely on the specialized information required for his plan. The vast dining hall remains still while the young noble works late into the silent night. A boy in patterned pajamas watches from a windowsill, observing the intense work with a cheerful expression. Harold reflects on Tasuku Sumeragi's reputation for compassion and the strategic value of his connections. He calculates how this alliance will allow him to support the protagonist Liner from the shadows. Despite the risk of altering the original story, Harold continues writing his plans to secure an ally. His focus intensifies as he recognizes the engagement as his primary chance to contact the Sumeragi family. Noticing the intruder, Harold coldly demands to know why the boy is bothering him instead of working. The curious boy peeks over Harold's shoulder, asking if another revolutionary farming method is being created. The boy in pajamas cheerily announces that he finally has a day off from his duties. Harold immediately kicks the intruder out of his room for bothering him with such useless information. Returning to his desk, Harold focuses on drafting his complex plans with a quill and ink. A memory surfaces of his younger self training vigorously with a wooden sword against a high wall. Exhaustion eventually overtakes him as he falls asleep in bed, while still clutching a reference book. He spends several more hours meticulously writing out detailed pages of strategic notes and diagrams. A sudden voice calls out for Harold to wake up as their morning journey reaches its destination. The carriage approaches the sprawling and elegant Sumeragi estate, situated beside a calm, reflective lake. Cherry blossom petals drift lazily through the air around the traditional tiled roofs of the mansion. An elderly servant in a patterned kimono warmly welcomes the visitors to the prestigious Sumeragi household. Harold reluctantly follows the local custom of removing his shoes before stepping onto the wooden floor. He pauses briefly to look at his own footwear, resting beside the servant's traditional wooden sandals. The servant leads the group in a single file line down a long, open-air hallway. Stopping before a set of sliding doors, the guide announces their arrival to the household master. Harold maintains a cold and composed expression while bracing himself for the formal meeting inside. Across the room, a young girl in a floral kimono sits poised between her two parents. He instantly recognizes her as Erika Sumeragi, a future comrade of the game's protagonist Liner. Harold identifies her as the one person in this world he must be most cautious of. He remembers her legendary reputation for having a sympathetic nature that even extends to monsters. He finally recalls that in the original story, he was the only person Erika truly hated. Erika contemplates the heavy financial obligation her family owes to the Stokes, despite Harold's notorious reputation. Harold ponders how an engagement would affect Erika's future if he deviates from his villainous path. He realizes that if she fails to join the protagonist party, the world's timeline will collapse. Understanding her role as the essential healer, Harold knows he cannot let her destiny be altered. A vision of world-ending destruction reminds him that failing to defeat the final boss is fatal. Harold determines that he must ensure Erika keeps a low opinion of him to maintain history. He clenches his fist while preparing to speak during the high-stakes formal introduction. The head of the household, Tasuku Sumeragi, offers a polite greeting to his young guest. Tasuku introduces his wife, Koyomi, who bows gracefully toward the visiting party. The introduction concludes with their daughter, Erika, who remains silent and observant throughout. Harold surprises himself by speaking with unexpected politeness as he formally introduces himself. His father jovially asks Erika for her honest impression of Harold's physical appearance. Erika responds with a faint smile, calling Harold very handsome directly to his face. Harold notices a strange lack of life in her eyes that never appeared in the game. He shifts his focus toward a specific task he needs to complete during this visit. Koyomi suggests that the two children spend some time alone to get to know each other better. Harold immediately recognizes this as a golden opportunity to further his secret goals. His father enthusiastically supports the proposal for a private meeting between the two heirs. The Sumeragi parents agree that a walk around the estate grounds is an excellent idea. Tasuku instructs Erika to give Harold a tour of the estate before the evening meal. Erika accepts the request to lead the way with a polite and humble response. She starts to guide Harold through the sliding doors of the traditional Japanese estate. Harold maintains a pleasant facade while mentally bracing himself for a high-stakes social performance. The series title flashes across the screen as the scene shifts to the outdoors. The pair strolls through the garden grounds under the shadow of the tall estate walls. The rhythmic clack of Erika's traditional footwear punctuates the quiet atmosphere of their walk. Reaching a majestic old tree, Erika pauses to restart their formal introduction in private. She looks him in the eye and states her name with unwavering poise. Harold follows suit, announcing his own identity while petals fall around them. An expectant silence lingers as the two young heirs stand facing one another. Erika gestures toward the massive cherry blossom tree, explaining its deep connection to her family. She recounts a 500-year-old legend about the seedlings brought by a feudal lord. Harold observes the flowers closely and realizes they are different from any modern cherry blossoms. Startled by his observation, Erika asks him how he could possibly know about such trees. He immediately assumes a cold persona and dismisses her family's sacred tree as a mere look-alike. Erika's gaze turns sharp as she asks if he truly lacks interest in the Sumeragi family. Though impressed by her verbal sparring, Harold tells her to interpret his rudeness however she wishes. She looks down in visible disappointment, concluding that he only values her family for their name. Harold decides that making her despise him is the best way to ensure her survival. He steps forward and asks if she is fundamentally misunderstanding his interest in her family. Harold sneers that his family name is superior, while mocking the Sumeragis for coming to him pitifully. These harsh words leave Erika visibly shaken as she struggles to process his unexpected hostility. Internal panic strikes Harold as he silently wonders if his insults were a bit too extreme. He abruptly extends a sealed envelope toward her, while petals drift through the quiet garden air. Erika looks at the mysterious letter with a guarded expression, unsure of his true intentions. He sternly commands her to accept the document and deliver it directly to her father. Turning her head away in defiance, Erika flatly refuses to take anything from him. Harold counters by warning her that her people will continue to perish if she remains stubborn. The threat hits its mark, causing Erika to ask if he truly possesses the solution. He smirks confidently and tells her that she has nothing left to lose by accepting. The two young heirs remain poised under the massive cherry blossom tree during their tense negotiation. Harold offers the letter one final time, prompting Erika to cautiously reach out her hand. She finally grasps the edges of the envelope, as their hands meet in a silent exchange. Holding the letter tight, she confesses her distrust, but agrees to carry out his request. Harold crosses his arms and tells her to wait for the results before making a judgment. Falling petals cover the ground as the heavy weight of their conversation finally settles. A momentary break in the action signals a transition to another location entirely. The scene moves to a large Western-style manor, standing tall under the afternoon sun. A polite elderly butler with glasses welcomes Harold home with a respectful gesture. Harold finally takes a seat on a sofa, while the butler suggests he get some rest. Harold demands a progress report on the current status of the LP farming method. The elderly butler confirms that farmers are ready and usable fields have been secured. He predicts that the initial trials can realistically begin within the next 10 days. Harold instructs him to continue following Jake's directions closely for the time being. Sitting alone, he feels relieved that his secret plans are proceeding without his parents' suspicion. He contemplates Erika's caring nature and her high probability of delivering his letter to Tasuku. His ultimate goal involves motivating Erika to eventually become a powerful ally for the protagonist. Doubts flicker as he wonders if Tasuku will actually trust medical advice from a child. He resolves to find another way to approach the situation if this gamble fails. Feeling content for the moment, he recalls the successful handoff of the mysterious letter. Time skips forward a few days as the sun shines brightly over the estate. Harold yells at a training partner for holding back during their intense combat practice. A young soldier bursts into tears while desperately trying to parry Harold's relentless blows. He cold-heartedly tells the trainee to attack as if they are prepared to die. The overwhelmed soldier panics at the impossible choice between two equally painful outcomes. Harold scoffs at the miserable thing lying defeated and exhausted on the grass. He realizes that regular soldiers are too afraid of his father to fight him seriously. The butler approaches the training field to interrupt Harold's frustrated internal monologue. Harold rests his weight on his practice sword while asking the butler for more information. Surprised by the news of a visitor, he wonders who would possibly come to see him. Erika Sumeragi makes a sudden appearance at the estate, shielded from the sun by her parasol. Harold's expression turns to one of pure shock as the butler confirms the identity of his guest. The story takes a comedic turn as it explores several ridiculous and farcical scenarios. In one dramatic sequence, his father prepares to execute a servant with a heavy sword. Colette looks on in horror while screaming for the violence to stop immediately. A quick motion halts the blade's descent with a resonant and sudden impact. Harold stuns his father by catching the live weapon with his bare palms. A map detailing the settlements within the Stokes territory is produced for review. Colette and her mother are shown in a moment of intense emotional distress. Harold examines the geographical layout while planning a rescue mission for the servant. He and the young girl are depicted dashing across the land together. A stylized drawing of a cat girl appears as the centerpiece of a gift. The characters engage in a quick and playful dance move in a simplified style. The butler panics upon realizing he brought a fan's gift instead of the actual map. A band of chibi-styled warriors strikes a triumphant and exaggerated pose for effect. Harold leans forward to help Colette by carefully adjusting her necklace or collar. He explains a technical plan involving water ratios while holding a small sack. The interaction remains focused as he continues to fix her attire in the quiet room. A statistical profile showcases Harold's absurdly high physical attributes as a young boy. He finishes the adjustment and stands quietly next to his companion after the task. A catcher reels back in shock as a pitch blazes past at a staggering speed. Harold vents his annoyance while Colette insists on taking matters into her own hands. The air fills with a loud reprimand against the disrespectful handling of a meal. Eyes wide and cheeks flushed, the boy marvels at the unexpectedly delicious flavor of the snack. Harold receives a gentle nudge and a warning about sleeping in such an exposed place. Pleased with the culinary success, Harold directs that the food be shown to the professional staff. A sudden sharp reaction breaks the peace as someone experiences an unexpected physical shock. The last bit of food disappears into a mouth as Harold observes the simple exchange. Comedic exhaustion takes over while Harold mumbles in his sleep about a successful high-hit combo. Someone throws a fragment of food into the sky with a burst of exaggerated energy. Erika gazes out over the landscape near a carriage, her mind set on a difficult journey. Her father bows his head in a quiet apology, while the family stands together in formal attire. She reassures him that her sacrifice is for the sake of the Sumeragi name and people. A close-up captures a hand gripping fabric tightly as the weight of the moment builds. Erika stands in somber silence, processing the gravity of the path she must now walk. Harold's harsh words about her noble lineage resurface, fueling her inner turmoil and resolve. A fist clenches an envelope with a sense of deep-seated vexation over her current plight. She reflects on the tragedy of becoming a victim to a family that lacks basic empathy. Her hand shakes with repressed emotion while she holds on to the letter she must deliver. Erica finally speaks to her father as he turns away with a deeply troubled and sorrowful look. Erica reveals that Harold entrusted her with a letter to be given to her father upon their return. Her father accepts the document while questioning Harold's intentions with a perplexed expression. Erica steels herself internally with the hope of saving her suffering citizens. Gazing ahead with a steady resolve, she vows to endure any shame that follows her path. A glimpse of Harold's fiery determination appears as he wields a glowing magical circle. The key figures in Harold's life stand together in a vibrant display of their distinct roles. Design sketches capture Harold's various moods and his signature, sharp, analytical gaze. Additional drawings showcase Erica's range of emotions, from quiet contemplation to shy curiosity. Modern interpretations show Harold checking a device, while Erica remains poised in traditional attire. Harold sits regally in a gold-trimmed chair with a confident and knowing smirk. Walking through the hallways, Harold maintains a serious demeanor with his hands tucked away. A rare moment of levity occurs as Harold shares a smile during a formal meeting. Resting his chin on his hand, Harold studies a document with deep concentration. Peace settles over the room as Harold dozes off in a chair beside indoor greenery. Erica offers a gentle, serene smile while looking toward the horizon. Light filters through window blinds to reveal the peaceful scenery outside. Harold ascends a library ladder to retrieve a specific book from the high shelves. A sudden look of realization crosses Harold's face as he stands amidst falling debris. His focus is interrupted by the shock of Erica's unexpected appearance during his farming trials. A solitary cup of tea sits on a table as the atmosphere remains quiet and still. Erica enjoys a quiet tea service outdoors while reflecting on her inability to read Harold's true character. Harold suddenly breaks the silence by questioning why she has come to visit him. Maintaining a stern expression, Harold gazes at Erica with a look of cold indifference. He approaches the tea table while critiquing her lack of a formal apology for making him wait. Harold continues his harsh remarks by stating that his time is far too valuable for social calls. Looking down in shame, Erica softly admits that her unannounced arrival was a mistake. A heavy sigh escapes Harold as he deals with the frustration of the unexpected meeting. He gives a dismissive hand gesture while the maid bows respectfully in the background. Harold moves forward to pull out a chair and sit across from his guest. Folding his arms defiantly, he orders her to get to the point and state her business. A close-up of Erica's eye reveals her intense focus as she prepares her response. She begins by offering her sincere thanks on behalf of the entire Sumeragi household. Bowing her head, she explains that his help has successfully saved many of their people. Harold listens while realizing his plan succeeded much faster than he had originally predicted. He lets out a mocking laugh at the thought of her family relying on a bootleg remedy. Erica acknowledges his words with a steady gaze, admitting they have no other choice. Harold leans back with a smirk and declares that he expects a great reward for his help. His mood shifts instantly as he warns her not to misunderstand the nature of his aid. He explains that the treatment was only a makeshift solution with potential side effects. Realization dawns on Erica as she understands that the medicine is not a permanent cure. Harold crosses his arms and coldly states that he won't help patients in serious condition. Erica looks down with a saddened expression while acknowledging his harsh terms. She reflects on their political engagement while wondering when Harold could have created a remedy. The young lady grows increasingly confused over how he succeeded where her family failed. Harold stares her down and bluntly questions if she has any other business. Reaching into her sleeve, Erica produces a letter and explains there is more to discuss. He stands up and demands that she hand over the message at once. Harold realizes that Erica was sent as a messenger to ensure the gesture felt sincere. The letter begins by addressing Harold regarding the specific antibiotics he had previously instructed. High-ranking members of the Sumeragi family express their immense gratitude for his timely intervention. They confirm that no side effects have appeared, but promise to monitor long-term patients. Harold reflects on how quickly his medical advice has already taken effect. He assumes the report is finished before noticing an additional section at the bottom. A postscript reveals that the Sumeragi territory is still under immense pressure from the illness. The writer expresses deep pain before introducing a personal request to the young lord. Harold's eyes widen in shock as he reads the plea to shelter Erica. He makes a pained expression while reading about a father's worry for his daughter. Clutching the paper, Harold looks completely overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. He leans his head on his hand and sighs over the absurdity of the request. Erica watches his reaction with a quiet look of surprise as the tension hangs between them. Erica expresses concern that living under the same roof would be an inconvenience. She reveals with a saddened look that her transportation has already departed. Harold covers his face in frustration upon hearing she has nowhere else to turn. He calls her a derogatory name, while she maintains a cheerful and polite facade. With an irritated grin, the young lord remarks on her surprising amount of guts. Erica remains composed and claims to be honored by his harsh assessment. Harold suddenly slams his fist onto the table in an outburst of anger. He yells that there is nothing honorable about fulfilling such a selfish request. The boy firmly refuses to house her because the provided compensation is underwhelming. Erica stands and calmly agrees to stop asking for his help. She politely excuses herself and walks away as Harold watches her with suspicion. He remains at the table while skeptically repeating her promise to ask for nothing else. Staring at the horizon, Harold contemplates the situation and admits he has a bad feeling. A silent transition follows as the weight of the interaction settles over the grounds. The wooden wheel of a carriage rattles over the rough cobblestones of the town. Townsfolk whisper in concern as they spot the recognizable Stokes family carriage approaching. Citizens tell each other to stay quiet to avoid being overheard by the passing nobles. Harold sits alone inside the vehicle with his arms crossed in a grumpy pout. A formal notice later confirms that the young lady will be staying at the estate. He bluntly states that he is not interested in living together with the girl. A smiling noble reminds Harold that both families have officially recognized his relationship with Lady Erica. Harold is ordered to travel to the Eastern Gate the following morning to collect his guest. He laments to himself that his initial bad premonition has turned out to be completely accurate. The boy realizes the suspicious timing of her arrival, despite the long journey from her home. He continues to harbor deep suspicions about the true intentions behind this sudden visit. Contemplating the girl's possible goals, he concludes that she had planned this stay from the start. Harold stares at an envelope, certain that a letter he wrote is the catalyst for this situation. He slumps his shoulders in defeat while acknowledging that he is simply reaping what he sowed. A guard stands watch before the massive iron bars of the territory's fortified eastern gate. A traditional wooden sandal steps firmly onto the dusty ground as a traveler finally arrives. Erica descends from the carriage, followed closely by a young woman carrying a large suitcase. Harold stands with his arms crossed and an annoyed expression while his companion greets the group. With a polite smile, Erica claims it is a great honor to be received by Harold personally. He immediately scoffs at her words, accusing her of being dishonest about her true feelings. The young lord suddenly pauses as he takes a closer look at the stranger accompanying her. Pointing a finger toward the unknown woman, he bluntly demands to know her identity. Erica introduces her companion as Yuno, an attendant sent to manage her daily necessities during her stay. Harold clicks his tongue in irritation while processing the addition of another unexpected person. He realizes with growing concern that this new character did not even exist in the original story. Gesturing dismissively, he warns the pair that he has no intention of looking after either of them. Harold tells the girls they are free to stay, provided they stay out of his way. Yuno responds with a playful smile and quickly accepts the young lord's conditions. Erica lowers her head respectfully while echoing her companion's polite acknowledgement of his rules. An irritated expression crosses Harold's face as he struggles to hide his growing frustration. He wonders why they do not simply return home if they truly understand his warning. Suddenly, an exuberant noble announces Erica's arrival to the entire gathered staff with grand gestures. Harold fumes silently as he watches the embarrassing spectacle unfolding before the bowing servants. The cheerful noble turns his attention back toward Harold with a wide, mischievous grin. He instructs Harold to personally escort Erica on a tour of the town the following morning. While Harold reacts with pure shock, Erica politely expresses her gratitude for the generous offer. She gazes directly at Harold and asks him to take good care of her during their time. Harold blushes deeply as he realizes that avoiding her has become an impossible task. Erica stands alone in her traditional attire, while holding a mysterious letter close to her chest. At the quiet Sumeragi estate, the traditional wooden architecture sits nestled among lush greenery. Inside a private room, two men discuss the contents of a recent message with grave concern. An elder noble scrutinizes the paper and expresses his deep suspicion regarding the sender's motives. Kiryu agrees with the sentiment while noting that the Stokes family has nothing obvious to gain. He narrows his eyes in deep thought as he considers a much darker possibility. A vision of the Stokes family appears as they discuss the potential decline of the rival house. The elder wonders if someone else is secretly pulling the strings behind the young boy's actions. Kiryu concludes that Harold might just be a messenger for a more powerful entity. He posits that identifying the true author of the letter is the primary concern. The elder noble questions if the sender intends to inflict harm upon the Stokes family. Kiryu suggests it could be an associate manipulating Harold with a specific temptation. They visualize Harold as if he were under some form of mental hypnosis. The elder argues that such a dangerous move seems unnecessary for their rivals. Kiryu ponders why a writer would go to such lengths to prevent certain events. The elder noble stares intently while acknowledging that the letter's warnings might be real. Kiryu remains silent for a moment as he processes the gravity of the situation. A voice suddenly calls out Kiryu's name to bring him back to the present. He then orders the immediate preparation of supplies for those brave enough to volunteer. The elder noble closes his eyes and accepts the command without any further debate. Meanwhile, the Stokes manor stands tall and imposing under the darkening evening sky. A succulent meat dish is presented on a plate as the centerpiece of a feast. Harold's father warmly encourages the gathered guests to enjoy the high-quality local ingredients. Erica and Yuno express their delight while admiring the spread of food before them. Harold remains lost in thought with a grim expression while ignoring the festivities. Noticing his unusual silence, his mother asks him if something is troubling him. Harold avoids her gaze and insists that absolutely nothing is wrong. His mother reaches out and places a gentle hand on his forehead to check for a fever. Erica and Yuno watch the domestic exchange with stunned and wide-eyed expressions. Meanwhile, Harold protests loudly against his mother's affectionate doting at the dinner table. But his mother merely laughs and teases him about being embarrassed before his fiancée. Then his father joins in the laughter while calling his son a shy child. Harold growls in frustration and criticizes his parents for their overly affectionate behavior in public. Nearby, the household servants stand in a line and quietly observe the family's unusual dynamic. Yuno remains silent while absorbing the bizarre social atmosphere of the Stokes household. An older servant watches the young noble with a mix of concern and scrutiny. Yuno begins to feel a sense of unease as she considers the underlying tensions. Erica maintains her composure while carefully monitoring the reactions of everyone in the room. In a fit of irritation, Harold aggressively devours his food to finish the meal quickly. A sudden desire to leave the manor immediately hangs heavy in the air over the table. The scene transitions to the outside where the manor sits silently beneath the starry night sky. Inside a room, someone meticulously packs a travel trunk with various garments and books. Yuno discusses Harold's rebellious nature with Erica while they prepare for their departure. She reflects on her father's suspicion that Harold might be entangled with a traitorous plot. Erica continues her packing as they conclude that Harold is not someone who follows orders. The mystery of whether he intends to help or deceive them remains entirely unsolved. Yuno declares that they must uncover his true intentions to safeguard the Sumeragi family's future. Erica listens with a serious gaze as they solidify their resolve to find the truth. Yuno explains her presence, affirming her commitment to the task at hand. Erica watches her with a worried expression and urges her friend to remain cautious. Yuno offers a reassuring smile while boasting that secret investigations are her specialty. Meanwhile, Harold sleeps soundly in his bed as the manor falls into deep silence. Yuno quietly peeks through a doorway to ensure no one is watching her movements. She gently pulls the door shut with a soft click before proceeding with her plan. Standing by an open window, she gazes out at the vast and starry night sky. Her thoughts drift toward Harold Stokes as she contemplates the enigma he presents. She wonders if his abrasive personality is merely a calculated act to hide a connection to a traitor. Flashbacks of Tasku's orders to rattle the young noble fill her mind as she analyzes recent events. Yuno concludes that their initial attempts to pressure him have largely been in vain. She even considers the wild possibility that Harold might be under some form of external control. Narrowing her eyes in deep thought, she questions if such supernatural manipulation is truly possible. Pulling out a sharp kunai, she prepares herself for the physical exertion her mission will require. Tension mounts as Harold faces off against Erica and Yuno in a silent confrontation. A well-dressed man explains the harsh reality of how nobles look down upon commoners. Local citizens appear distressed while discussing the heavy burden of taxes on their simple lives. A young man warns that any form of rebellion would only lead to a swift death. Later, Yuno stands in the town square and listens to a local man's account of the situation. The man looks away with a troubled sigh as he mentions a recent issue involving his son. Yuno asks the man if something has happened recently involving the young Harold Stokes. The local man leans in and whispers a piece of gossip that leaves her stunned. She questions if the story might be a misunderstanding, while the man remains uncertain. Considering his family's reputation, Yuno admits the disturbing news seems all too plausible. The midday sun casts long shadows over the quiet rooftops of the residential district. A heavy wooden door slams shut with a violent bang that echoes through the alleyway. Residents stop in their tracks and look around with expressions of confusion and alarm. Another entrance is shut tightly as a wave of apprehension washes over the neighborhood. Silhouettes of residents huddle together while hushed whispers begin to circulate among the crowd. Steady footsteps tap against the stone ground as a figure walks with clear purpose. Harold and Erica stand side by side in a narrow street while gazing toward the town's architecture. He scans the nearby buildings for a specific shop, while Erica follows with a heavy heart. After finding the bakery, Harold calls out to the merchant who reacts with visible shock. The man forces a strained smile and bows while nervously acknowledging the young noble's presence. Harold orders a selection of treats for his companion, while promising payment at a later time. The shopkeeper quickly prepares a small gift and extends it with trembling hands. Erica accepts the offering and quietly expresses her gratitude while looking away in distress. Noticing her cold demeanor, Harold reflects on how much she seems to despise him. He suspects she is still investigating the truth behind the dark rumors of his past. Thoughts of his parents and the safety of his servants occupy his mind as they walk. Harold decides that they have stayed out long enough and suggests returning home. Erica softly agrees to his proposal as they stand near the town's quiet buildings. She remains silent while a look of deep contemplation settles across her face. Meanwhile, a discussion regarding the progress of recent agricultural efforts begins elsewhere. Harold listens carefully while his aides report on the favorable growth at several locations. He suggests a rapid expansion of the current operation to capitalize on the success. The aides hesitate and explain that a lack of manpower makes further growth difficult. Frustrated by the limitation, Harold asks if any other estate staff can be utilized. An advisor suggests two specific individuals who might serve as temporary inspectors. Harold rejects the idea because those men are already burdened with their own duties. He considers seeking external help or requesting additional aids from his father. The lead aide gently refocuses the meeting on the remaining sections of the report. Technical details regarding the soil and the rotation of specific crops are discussed next. Harold notes that local chefs haven't noticed any change in the quality or taste. He determines that more observation is required before making a final judgment on the results. The scene shifts to the exterior of the grand estate as evening approaches. Erica sits alone at a table while reflecting on the unsettling atmosphere of the town. Yuno enters the room and offers a supportive presence to the troubled young girl. Erica confesses her shock at the overwhelming lack of public support for the Stokes family. She realizes that the cold gazes from the mansion's servants were far from her imagination. Erica wonders if the kindness she received was merely pity for being Harold's fiancée. While Yuno acknowledges that the sheer intensity of the public's hatred is truly unusual, prompting Erica to observe that the investigation into the estate's dark secrets is moving fast. Yuno confirms this by explaining how one inquiry leads to a flood of responses. Then she admits that a single specific story has particularly piqued her curiosity. Her face darkens as she begins to recount a deeply troubling recent incident. She reveals a rumor claiming Harold used magic to incinerate a servant and her family, mentioning that the victims were a woman named Clara and her 9-year-old child. Erica reacts with visible shock and desperately asks if this could simply be slander, but Yuno counters by stating that every servant she questioned gave the same testimony. Leaving Erica trembling with the realization that the rumors might actually be true, she recalls Harold's past insults and his apparent loathing for those he considers weak. Yet she struggles to forget that he also provided hope for the Sumeragi people. Her eyes widen as she tries to make sense of the man's contradictory nature. She admits she had begun to think Harold was different from his cruel parents, sinking into a state of deep despair as her hands tremble with mounting fear. Yuno warns her to stop being alone with Harold while she continues her spying. Erica bows her head and softly agrees to keep her distance from her fiancé. Seeing her distress, Yuno offers words of comfort and promises to stay by her side. She maintains a calm and mysterious expression as the weight of the revelation lingers. Erica clutches her clothing in distress while trying to reassure herself that everything will be all right. Harold shouts a confident reassurance while looking back at a previous meeting in his room. A brief memory surfaces of Erica describing the squirrel-designed frosted cookies Harold gave her. The scene shifts to Harold gripping his sword tightly as lightning crackles around the blade. Two maids whisper about Erica's declining health in the 2 weeks since her outing with Harold. A hand reaches out to touch the cold wire mesh of a window during the conversation. Erica stands alone in the shadows of her room, staring out at the distant horizon. The view expands to show the quiet and empty hills surrounding the vast estate. Clouds drift lazily over the landscape as the day continues in complete silence. Harold stands in a remote forest clearing where he once rescued Clara to begin his training. He wears a dark grin while savoring the opportunity to finally swing his blade without restraint. Intense sparks of electricity begin to dance along the length of his heavy sword. Harold takes a wide stance as the magical energy reaches a violent boiling point. He unleashes the swift lightning technique. While bolts of energy rain down upon the earth, a massive explosion of electrical force tears into the ground with a deafening roar. The shock wave from the strike slices through the air and levels the immediate area. Debris and shattered rock fly upward from the sheer power of the magical impact. Lightning arcs continue to flicker across the scorched earth following the devastating attack. The dust begins to settle as Harold stands silently in the center of the clearing. He clicks his tongue in a show of minor annoyance or dissatisfaction with the results. Harold sighs while clutching his forehead, frustrated that his current magical output falls short of his expectations. He paces through the clearing, comparing his newbie magic to the legendary strength of the game's original version. His expression turns cold and determined, refusing to accept any level of mediocrity in his swordplay. Gazing into the distance, he envisions the terrifying power he must eventually achieve to survive this world. Electrical sparks flicker around him once more as he vows to reach a higher tier of combat capability. Hidden among the nearby foliage, a small hand grips a tree trunk while observing the boy's display. A young spy with a large hair bow watches silently from the shadows, her breath catching in her throat. She swallows hard, realizing the raw power she just witnessed is far beyond anything she had anticipated. Harold stands with his back to her, effortlessly resting a massive blade upon his shoulder as lightning fades. The watcher reflects on the potential danger Harold poses, questioning if a direct confrontation is even wise. A bead of sweat rolls down her cheek as she considers the extreme risk of being discovered. She acknowledges that her survival would be unlikely if the boy chose to turn his blade against her. Planning a cautious retreat, she decides to withdraw and return only when she has better information. A sudden, deafening noise cuts through the air, shattering the silence and signaling that her presence is known. Harold barks in order for the intruder to stop hiding like a rat and show themselves immediately. The spy reels in shock as Harold's sword embeds itself into the tree, just inches from her face. Her sandals scuff against the dry grass as she is forced out of her hiding spot by the strike. Crouching low in the undergrowth, she curses her misfortune while trying to regain some sense of composure. Fear flashes in her eyes as she frantically weighs her options between fighting or attempting a desperate escape. She finally accepts that a child possessing such monstrous talent has likely been aware of her every move. Yuno sits paralyzed behind the tree as the embedded sword looms over her. Sweating profusely, she realizes her cover is blown, and a simple lie won't suffice. Harold stares into the dense forest, waiting for the hidden observer to make a move. Internally, he panics because the sword accidentally slipped, yet he maintains a cold, stoic facade. The woods remain eerily quiet as he wonders why the intruder hasn't revealed themselves yet. Dread washes over him as he fears the impact sound meant he seriously injured the spy. A sudden rustle from the foliage breaks the tension and catches his immediate attention. The girl named Yuno finally emerges, offering a polite apology for her secret observation. Harold looks away, feeling a wave of relief seeing she is completely unharmed by his throw. Assuming his arrogant, noble persona, he warns her to stay in plain sight or face consequences. Yuno lowers her eyes, accepting the boy's verbal lashing with a quiet, submissive grace. Behind her gentle smile, she recognizes that his lethal throw was a calculated warning. She senses the overwhelming pressure radiating from the young boy as he stands his ground. The realization hits her that any further intrusion would result in a far more dangerous response. Gazing at him, she interprets the silent threat behind his sharp words and cold demeanor. Noticing the blade's precise position, she marvels at his ability to resolve the situation bloodlessly. She questions her own ability to protect Erica from a talent as monstrous as his. Harold remains motionless, his power and ingenuity leaving a deep impression on the hidden agent. Conceding to his superiority, she acknowledges this encounter as a complete defeat for her mission. The two stand together in the quiet clearing as the wind blows through the trees. Harold casually inquires about the well-being of the sheltered girl while maintaining his arrogant posture. Yuno informs him that Erica is unwell, suggesting the new environment is taking a toll on her. Dismissively, Harold suggests that she should simply return home if she is homesick. When Yuno asks for more kindness towards his fiancée, he coldly rejects being bound by such things. Yuno asks for clarification, clearly taken aback by his harsh and blunt refusal. Internally, Harold panics as he realizes he may have spoken too much about his true intentions. He worries that revealing his thoughts on the engagement's cancellation could lead to unforeseen trouble. Shouting that he owes her no explanation, he abruptly turns away from the confused girl. He contemplates the situation further, noting that Erica has been unwell for an unusually long time. Harold continues walking while recalling that her character should not possess such a weak constitution. Yuno stands quietly in the clearing, watching the young boy leave with a pensive look. A shot of the vast sky accompanies his concern that a significant event has been triggered. The narrative pauses momentarily as production credits appear against a plain white background. High above, Erica peers out of a window with a look of deep melancholy on her face. Harold poses dramatically with a glowing sword as the chapter title introduces a sorrowful theme. Nearby, the household staff whispers about how Erica has not been herself for 2 weeks. A maid expresses her genuine concern for the young lady's declining health and spirits. Erica stands alone by her window, watching the curtains flutter in the gentle breeze. The scene transitions to a wide, serene landscape of rolling hills and distant mountains. Clouds drift across the horizon as the focus shifts toward the changing natural world. Harold decides to train at the secluded site where he previously rescued Narara to avoid prying eyes. He smiles with anticipation, realizing he can finally unleash his full power without holding back. Sparks of electrical energy begin to crackle and dance around the hilt of his massive blade. Channeling his mana, he readies himself as the sword becomes engulfed in a brilliant, blinding light. With a fierce cry, he summons a barrage of massive lightning bolts that strike the earth. The devastating electrical discharge tears through the clearing with overwhelming force and speed. Streaks of energy lash out across the landscape, leaving a path of destruction in their wake. A violent explosion of light and sound erupts as the magic impacts the rugged terrain. The remaining currents of electricity sizzle through the air before gradually fading into the atmosphere. Harold remains poised in the center of the field, gripping his sword while surveying the impact. Despite the raw power displayed, he mutters a denial, clearly unsatisfied with the result of his effort. Sighing heavily, he wipes his brow and laments that his current level of skill is still insufficient. He paces through the clearing, comparing his performance to the legendary strength of the original Harold. His expression hardens as he considers the immense gap between himself and the game's version. A mental image of the true Harold's imposing silhouette serves as a reminder of his ultimate goal. He vows to push himself even harder to match the overwhelming power he knows is possible. A sudden sharp flash of light signals a shift in the quiet surroundings of the forest. Hidden behind the thick trunk of a tree, a young girl watches his secret training in silence. She nervously realizes the danger of her position, fearing the consequences if her presence is discovered. Mesmerized by his hidden talent, she acknowledges the incredible secret of his superior swordsmanship and magic. The girl ponders if Harold is a threat and realizes she won't know without a conversation. She stands nervously against a tree, acknowledging the immense trouble she has found herself in. Fearing for her life, she worries that saying the wrong thing could lead to a fatal end. Despite the risk, she decides to approach while relying on her secret ability to escape if necessary. A sudden, sharp noise pierces the silence of the forest and catches her off guard. Harold calls out into the trees, sternly demanding that the hidden observers show themselves immediately. The girl gasps in terror as she realizes Harold is onto her hidden position. Her foot shuffles against the grass, making a distinct sound that echoes through the clearing. Crouching low to the ground, she realizes with mounting dread that she is completely done for. She frantically considers running away but questions if that is truly her best option for survival. Harold remains on high alert, suspecting his young age hasn't hindered his ability to detect her presence. Leaning back against the trunk, she trembles at the thought of Harold actually planning to kill her. She closes her eyes tightly and reminds herself that she cannot afford to make a single mistake. Harold continues to scan the dense forest, searching for any sign of the person watching him. He suddenly breaks his serious persona, panicking internally because he feels his hand has slipped up. Reflecting on his choice of location, He wonders why someone would be in this isolated area. Harold grows increasingly anxious and tired, lamenting the fact that he spoke his thoughts out loud. Another sound from the nearby bushes startles him, drawing his gaze back to the intruder's location. His eyes widen in shock as the identity of the person hidden in the brush is revealed. The young girl named Yuno steps forward and bows deeply, apologizing profusely for following him. Harold considers the situation, secretly feeling relieved that the young girl escaped unharmed. Turning back to her, he issues a stern warning to stay within his line of sight. The girl bows deeply while offering another sincere apology for her intrusive behavior. She reflects on her narrow escape, feeling lucky to still be alive after the tense confrontation. Watching his every move, she interprets his presence as a silent but clear warning. She acknowledges that any further mistakes on her part will likely lead to dire consequences. Looking at him, she tries to decipher the hidden signals he might be giving her. She shudders at the sword in the tree, realizing how effortlessly he detected her hidden position. Questioning her own capabilities, she wonders if Erica can ever be truly safe from him. Harold stands firmly before her, radiating an aura of overwhelming strength and cold wisdom. She smiles sadly to herself, accepting that she has faced a total and absolute defeat. A heavy silence descends upon the forest clearing as they stand facing each other. Breaking the tension, Harold casually asks about the condition of the girl he calls Gloomy. Yuno reports that Erica is struggling to adapt to the new and unfamiliar surroundings. He wears a villainous grin while suggesting they should simply return home if they are unhappy. Yuno chides him for his cold attitude and begs him to show some kindness to his fiancée. She stares at him in confusion, trying to grasp the true meaning of his dismissive remarks. Harold suddenly freezes in alarm, realizing he might have spoken far more than he intended. He panics internally, desperate to keep his secret plan to break the engagement hidden. Calling her Setsum, he bluntly refuses to explain himself and prepares to leave her behind. Harold reflects on how long it has been since Erica last fell ill. He realizes that such a disease setting was never part of the original game's lore. Yuno watches him with a look of quiet observation and slight curiosity. Staring at the sky, he wonders if this unexpected illness is a significant narrative flag. Erica gazes out of an upstairs window with a deeply sorrowful expression. Yuno breaks the silence by asking when he intends to recruit more people. Harold curses his own perceived stupidity as he struggles with the complex situation. He abruptly walks away, instructing her not to wait for his return. A lone figure walks along the stone path outside the Grand Manor house. Panic sets in as Harold suddenly remembers he left his sword behind in the woods. He sprints past the tall windows, anxious about leaving a dangerous weapon unattended. He resolves to retrieve the sword quickly before the forest turns dark. In the distance, he spots a girl standing alone in a wide field of flowers. He pauses between the stone pillars, wondering if she has truly recovered from her illness. Watching her closely, he worries about the wisdom of her being outdoors so soon. The girl reacts with sudden shock, her face flushing as she realizes someone is watching. Harold grows increasingly concerned that she might collapse in the middle of the field. She trembles and clutches her kimono, looking visibly weak and unstable on her feet. Realizing he cannot simply ignore her, Harold decides he must take action. He steps into the flower field to convince her to return to her room. Harold harshly commands Erica to return to her room instead of loitering while still unwell. He immediately regrets his abrasive tone, cursing his inability to communicate his concern kindly. The two children stand in a heavy, awkward silence amidst the vast flower field. Growing impatient, Harold demands that she say something instead of just staring at him. Erica remains quiet, her head bowed as she struggles with her own internal conflict. He sighs, realizing that trying to force a conversation is likely a waste of time. Harold acknowledges that it is understandably difficult for her to speak to someone she despises. He begins to walk away, hoping his absence will allow her to retreat inside peacefully. Over his shoulder, he flippantly remarks that he cares little if her health deteriorates further. Erica's hands tremble as she grips her kimono, finally gathering the courage to speak. She calls out for him to wait, causing Harold to pause and look back curiously. With a hesitant voice, she admits there is one specific thing she must ask him. Harold turns his full attention to her, wondering what she could possibly want to know. Another moment of tense anticipation passes as they lock eyes in the open field. Erica asks if the rumor about him burning a servant to ashes is actually true. Harold stares at her in silence, processing the dark reputation that precedes him everywhere. He realizes this horrific story is the primary source of her obvious fear of him. Prepared to address the accusation, Harold maintains a cold and distant demeanor while listening. Erica offers a small, hopeful smile, thinking he might deny the terrible rumors. Harold flashes a sinister grin and claims he killed both the servant and her daughter. Erica stares in frozen horror as Harold continues to weave his dark and bloodthirsty lies. He shrugs indifferently, claiming the lives he took were simply annoying obstacles in his way. With a sinister expression, he compares the value of common people to that of simple livestock. Unable to listen to any more of his cruelty, Erica looks down and dismisses him. Harold pushes further, claiming he killed a child just so she wouldn't be left alone. He laughs loudly at her reaction, mocking the very concept of freedom for those he deems inferior. Trembling with grief, Erica pleads with him to stop speaking such heartless words. Her anger finally boils over as she lashes out with a sudden, stinging slap. Tears stream down her face while she looks at him with a gaze full of resentment. Harold accepts her judgment in silence, his face hidden as he maintains his cold persona. A tense and heavy silence settles over the field as they stand several feet apart. Erica shouts that he is truly the worst human being she has ever had the misfortune to meet. The red mark on Harold's cheek burns while he stares back with a hardened expression. He scoffs at her outburst, asking with cold indifference why her opinion should matter to him. Acting pleased by her hatred, he declares that they have nothing more to say to one another. A single tear tracks down Erica's face as she processes the finality of his rejection. She abruptly announces her departure, unable to bear staying in his presence for another second. Harold watches in silence as she turns her back on him and retreats toward the distant mansion. Once alone, he touches his face, reflecting on the heavy price of maintaining his villainous role. The encounter concludes with a view of the distant clouds drifting slowly across the silent sky. A quiet, ornate hallway within the Stokes mansion remains empty and still. Zen comes running through the corridor with a bright and cheerful smile. He waves his hand enthusiastically while calling out to Harold. Entering the sitting room, Zen asks Harold if he has finished his daily training. He steps forward onto the patterned rug to join his master. Harold stands motionless with a cold and vacant expression, ignoring the friendly greeting. Sensing something is wrong, Zen asks if a problem has occurred. Harold turns away and demandingly tells Zen to leave him alone for the day. Without further explanation, Harold physically shoves Zen out of the room. The heavy double doors slam shut, leaving Zen crumpled on the floor. Zen stares at the closed door with a look of utter confusion and hurt. Inside the room, Harold stands in the shadows with his head hanging low. He collapses against the back of the door and lets out a weary sigh. Touching his cheek, he remembers the sting of the slap he received. The image of Erica's tearful, resentful face flashes vividly in his mind. Harold sits alone in the dark, contemplating the emotional toll of his cruelty. He acknowledges to himself that enduring such direct hatred is incredibly difficult. Despite the pain, he steels his resolve and tells himself not to be shaken. The sun begins to set over the mansion as Harold faces his isolation. Erica looks down at Harold with a mix of anger and sorrow in her eyes. Erica's eyes well with tears as she declares someone to be the worst human being imaginable. The title screen appears, marking a new chapter in the ongoing struggle against a cruel fate. Standing alone in a vast field, Erica gazes into the distance while wearing a traditional kimono. A younger Harold runs along a stone path, suddenly realizing he left his sword in the woods. He continues sprinting toward the mansion, hoping that Yuno does not find the discarded weapon. Looking determined, he decides he must retrieve the sword before the darkness of night falls. Harold stops in his tracks when he spots Erica standing alone amidst a field of flowers. He pauses to observe her from a distance, wondering if she is feeling all right. Hesitation takes hold as he considers whether it is safe for him to approach her now. Erica begins to shiver uncontrollably, her face appearing flushed and her expression full of distress. Harold remains conflicted, debating if he should help her or simply walk away to avoid trouble. Clutching her chest, Erica shows signs of physical pain as her condition seemingly worsens. Deciding he cannot ignore her, Harold steps forward with the intent to take her back to safety. He adopts a harsh tone, calling her an idiot for being out while she is sick. Internally, Harold seethes with anger at himself for being unable to offer kind words of concern. An awkward silence descends upon the pair as they stand together in the open field. Frustrated by the lack of response, Harold demandingly asks why she will not speak to him. Erica keeps her head bowed low, hiding her face while refusing to utter a single word. Harold panics internally as he realizes his attempts to help are only causing more friction. She remains still, trapped by the inability to speak honestly to someone she truly dislikes. Harold stands amongst the flowers, calculating how to make Erica return to her room safely. He turns away with a cold shrug, dismissing her worsening condition as none of his concern. Erica's hands tremble as she desperately calls out for him to stay and listen. Stopping in his tracks, Harold glances back with a look of mild annoyance. She manages to find her voice, insisting that she has a specific question for him. Harold stares at her intently, demanding to know what is on her mind. A tense silence hangs between them as they face each other in the open field. Looking directly at him, Erica brings up the dark rumors about him burning a servant. Her gaze remains fixed on his as she asks if the terrible stories are true. Harold realizes the source of her distress, acknowledging the weight of her accusation. He begins to deny the claim before his cursed persona takes control of the conversation. A brief smile of relief crosses Erica's face until he continues his dark revelation. Instead, Harold adopts a wicked grin and claims he murdered both the servant and his daughter. Erica is frozen in terror while he brands himself a demon who values no human life. He casually dismisses his actions, claiming they were forced and lacked any significant motivation. His cruel smile widens as he compares the lives of those he supposedly killed to mere livestock. Erica bows her head in despair, unable to process the heartless nature of his confession. Harold continues his mockery, suggesting his killings were a mercy to prevent any lingering loneliness. He erupts into a fit of dark laughter while mocking the unfortunate fate of the lowborn. Erica finally whispers a plea for him to stop, her spirit crushed by his overwhelming malice. Erica swings her hand and delivers a sharp slap across Harold's face. Her expression twists into a mask of pure indignation and betrayal. Harold lowers his head in silence as the sting of the blow registers. They remain locked in a heavy, wordless moment amidst the vast field of flowers. Tears well up in Erica's eyes as she screams that he is truly the worst person. A red mark burns on Harold's cheek while he maintains a cold, unflinching gaze. He dismissively asks why her opinion should even matter to him. Erica turns her back to him, declaring she has no interest in further conversation. A single tear tracks down her cheek as she struggles to keep her composure. Harold simply pardons himself, making no effort to apologize for his heartless words. She walks toward the distant estate alone, leaving him standing in the field. Harold gently touches his bruised face while reflecting on the weight of the encounter. Gray clouds drift slowly across the sky as the atmosphere remains somber. The silence of the long hallways emphasizes the sudden isolation of the estate. A cheerful young boy suddenly comes running down the corridor with a bright smile. He waves his hand enthusiastically while calling out a warm greeting to Harold. Entering the grand living room, the boy asks if Harold has finished his training. His small shoes click against the polished wooden floor as he approaches. Harold stands tall and unresponsive while the boy gazes up with genuine concern. The boy asks if something is wrong before being told to get out of the room. Harold turns his head away, claiming he is tired and demands to be left alone. Zenon protests indignantly as Harold physically pushes him out of the room. Meanwhile, the heavy double doors slam shut, leaving Zenon kneeling on the floor in shock. The young boy stares blankly at the wood, his expression one of total confusion. Inside, Harold stands alone behind the massive doors, with his head bowed in deep contemplation. He slowly slides down the frame, eventually sitting on the floor while sighing. Resting his head against the door, his eyes narrow in a cold and calculating gaze. Suddenly, a memory of Erica's tearful and angry face flashes through his mind. Harold admits to himself that the words he spoke to her were incredibly harsh. He reflects on how he intentionally hurt her just to force her to leave. Grit and determination return to his eyes as he tells himself not to hesitate. As night falls over the grand estate, the windows glow against the darkening sky. Erica stops and turns slightly, demanding to know where the other girls are. Harold looks back at her with a blank expression, bewildered by the unexpected question. The two children remain at a distance while a profound silence settles between them. Erica glares at him with pure indignation, repeating her demand with even more intensity. Harold meets her gaze with a cold and silent stare, refusing to give an answer. Facing away from each other, a sharp divide emphasizes the emotional gap between the two nobles. Soon after, soft curtains frame a tall window as moonlight filters into the quiet room. Harold lies awake in bed, staring into the darkness with a look of profound loneliness. The ornate grandfather clock shows the time is well past noon. Harold finally wakes up in his massive bed, realizing he has overslept. Resting his head on his hand, he reflects on the physical and emotional toll. A memory of Erica's furious and tear-streaked face flashes before him once more. He stares into space with a somber expression, feeling no joy in his words. A sudden loud rumble from his stomach breaks his deep and gloomy train of thought. Sitting alone in the center of the bed, he appears small and deeply troubled. Deciding he needs to eat, he heads toward the dining area for a meal. While he quietly eats a sandwich, Zenon enters the room to check on him. The butler expresses concern over the young master's late start and potential fatigue. Harold dismisses the worry, claiming he simply had a difficult time falling asleep. He quickly changes the subject to discuss the logistics of the LP farming method. Harold emphasizes the need to recruit a larger workforce to expand the operation. He suggests demonstrating the farming benefits to merchants to secure a formal contract. Zenon looks visibly taken aback by the bold suggestion of involving outside merchants. Harold outlines a profit-sharing model to incentivize both the inventor and the traders. He explains that a major company is necessary to provide inspectors for the farmers. Zenon inquires if Harold already has a specific company in mind for the partnership. Leaning back in his chair, Harold admits he lacks the necessary connections. Zenon ponders the difficulty of approaching large corporations without an established reputation. Harold rests his chin on his hand while contemplating the lack of independent merchants. Meanwhile, he worries that using his parents' connections would expose his secret methods. Zenon supports the plan but highlights the challenge of finding reliable business partners. Deciding to proceed anyway, Harold instructs the butler to share the details with Jake. Zenon acknowledges the command before stepping out to fulfill his duties. The focus shifts to a closed door elsewhere in the Grand Stokes Manor. A firm hand knocks against the wood as a voice calls for Harold. Zen continues to shout for the young master while standing before the entrance. Receiving no answer, he pauses for a moment with a look of confusion. He eventually decides to enter, hearing the soft click of the door opening. Scanning the area, Zen realizes that the room is actually completely vacant. He walks down the hall while grumbling about waking up early for nothing. His search leads him to another room where Erica sits silently on a couch. After offering a polite greeting, Zen introduces himself to the quiet noble girl. Erica explains that she is alone because her attendant Yuno went into town. Zen smiles broadly and asks her why she is waiting there by herself. She looks away with a melancholic expression, mentioning Harold's absence from the area. He clarifies that he only stopped by because Harold's room was nearby. Shifting the topic, Zen voices his hope that the master isn't overworking himself. He then notices her deep sadness and asks what is troubling her. Erica stares down in somber silence while contemplating the heavy atmosphere between them. She asks Zen if he is truly unaware of the dark rumors surrounding his master. The young man responds with a look of genuine confusion, questioning the nature of her concerns. Erica turns her gaze away while recounting the horrific tale of Harold murdering a household servant. Zen admits to hearing the whispers but maintains a cautious stance regarding their validity. He explains that he prefers not to jump to conclusions when the evidence remains inconclusive. The noble girl insists the story must be true because Harold personally confirmed the details. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Zen feels a surge of nervous tension and anxiety. Erica wonders aloud how someone like him can continue to serve such a cold-blooded man. He remains speechless and taken aback by the intensity of her moral dilemma. Her eyes reflect deep inner turmoil as she struggles to reconcile her feelings for her fiancé. She questions how forgiveness is even possible for someone who has taken another life. Zen stands tall while trying to find the right words to comfort the grieving girl. Erica clenches her fist tightly while thinking about her duty to the Sumeragi family. She suddenly breaks down into tears, confessing that she cannot bring herself to forgive Harold. After a moment of intense grief, she politely excuses herself and begins to walk away. Zen watches her departure with a somber expression as he reflects on her painful admission. He stands alone in the room while questioning if the current path is truly right. Looking at her retreating figure, he realizes that Erica and Harold share a similar burden. He acknowledges that Harold continues to save others, despite bearing the dishonor of being called a murderer. Erica stands in quiet contemplation while repressing her true feelings for the sake of her family. Zen observes her retreating figure, while lamenting how two similar souls remain so tragically at odds. He decides that the current situation cannot be allowed to continue any longer. A vision of Harold and Erica walking side by side fills his mind as he considers their potential. Suddenly, Zen calls out to Erica, prompting her to stop and turn around in confusion. He gathers his courage and asks the noble girl to accompany him somewhere immediately. Erica's eyes widen in surprise as she reacts to the unexpected and bold request. Internalizing his resolve, Zen offers a silent apology to Harold for what he is about to do. He reflects on his deep-seated fear that Harold might eventually break under his heavy burdens. Clenching his fist with renewed purpose, the young man refuses to let that tragedy happen. He acknowledges that turning a blind eye to Harold's suffering would be a lifelong regret. Zen realizes he could never forgive himself if he didn't at least try to save his master. Erica watches him with a hesitant expression as she senses the shift in his demeanor. Standing firm, Zen expresses his willingness to be forsaken if it means he can provide assistance. He implores the girl to spare just a moment to hear the truth she needs to know. She gazes back at him with a look of intense curiosity and lingering doubt. After a brief pause, Erica relents and asks where he intends to lead her. Zen cheerily guides her along as she reacts with a mix of shock and bewilderment. The two arrive before a pair of massive, ornate double doors deep within the estate. With a final push of encouragement, Zen urges Erica to enter the room without hesitation. Erica questions their current location while Zen gestures toward the set of doors ahead. He reveals with a confident smirk that they have arrived at Harold's room. Erica stands in the hallway looking completely bewildered by the servant's plan. Her eyes widen in shock as she processes the weight of his audacity. Zen reflects on his long history of serving the young and difficult master. Quickly apologizing, he tells Erica to stay put for just a moment. Zen throws the doors open and enters with a loud and panicked exclamation. Harold looks over with a piercing and deeply annoyed glare at his servant. The young man immediately raises his hands to placate his irritated master. Harold demands to know what business Zen has barging into his private space. He coldly orders the servant to be a good dog and leave. Meanwhile, Erica watches through the slats of her cramped hiding spot with trepidation. She panics upon realizing that her only chance to escape has completely vanished. Erica listens intently while questioning Zen's motives from within her dark hiding place. Zen persists and tells Harold that there is something important to say. The servant brings up the troubling rumors that are currently surrounding Clara. Erica remains hidden while listening to every word with a strained expression. Zen argues that doing nothing will cause Harold's reputation to plummet further. Harold sighs while reclining on the sofa and notes his reputation is gone. Zen looks on in utter disbelief at his master's unexpected and wary admission. Harold dismisses the concern with a cold and indifferent question about the consequences. He asks if Zen expects him to publicly announce the survival of the hidden duo. Zen stares back with a stunned and uneasy expression at the blunt suggestion. A brief visual pause emphasizes the heavy tension growing in the private room. Zen quickly waves his hands in frantic denial while Erica listens from her hiding spot. Harold clarifies that his parents finding the truth would put him under direct suspicion. The servant suggests that they should at least inform Lady Erica of the truth. Zen points out that she is currently suffering under the weight of the grim rumors. Harold responds with a sharp and absolute refusal that leaves no room for argument. Zen flinches in surprise at the intensity of his master's cold demeanor. Erica looks down with a heavy heart as she continues to eavesdrop on them. The confused servant asks why Harold insists on keeping her in the dark. Harold remains silent while staring ahead with a focused and stern gaze. He narrows his eyes while contemplating the hidden reasons he cannot reveal. The young noble reflects on his goal to make Erica despise him for his own survival. Harold recognizes that Zen's genuine kindness is becoming a dangerous obstacle. He begins to craft a lie to silence his servant by mentioning her tears. Zen reacts with total confusion to the unexpected observation about Erica's emotions. Harold questions whether she was mourning for his actions or for the supposed victims. He looks away while labeling her empathy for others as nothing more than foolishness. Harold explains that walking beside someone so kind would only lead to them being endlessly hurt. Zen realizes that Harold is deliberately keeping Erica at a distance out of genuine concern. Harold maintains his harsh facade by claiming the separation is for both of their benefit. He cruelly insults Erica's sensitive nature while she listens silently from the shadows. Zen watches his master with a deeply troubled and skeptical expression. The servant asks for clarification on whether Harold actually intends to go through with the marriage. Harold bluntly rejects the idea while Zen questions the original purpose of the engagement talk. He describes the arrangement as nothing more than a contract bought with money. A flashback reveals the miasma that devastated the Sumeragi family's vital forestry industry years ago. Harold explains how his family provided financial aid to secure the Sumeragi bloodline. Zen understands that breaking the engagement would have been a fatal blow to the Sumeragis. Harold reveals with a confident smirk that he has already taken measures to prevent that. He mentions a secret letter addressed to Tasku that he had Erika deliver in person. Erika listens with a shocked expression as she discovers the truth behind her errand. Zen reacts with utter surprise upon hearing about the hidden correspondence. Harold explains that the letter contained the method for manufacturing a miasma antibody. The plan involves using the drug to restore the Sumeragi's forest industry to normal. He further reveals his intention to offer them a special farming method technique. Harold admits he kept the letter vague because the process still lacks sufficient testing. He concludes by stating that he is now open to breaking off the engagement. Harold confidently asserts that the Sumeragis will eventually survive independently using the antibody and farming techniques. Hidden nearby, Erika hears that her family will be safe even if her engagement is terminated. The young girl's eyes widen as she processes the depth of Harold's secret benevolence toward her kin. Zen scratches his head in confusion, struggling to keep up with the complexity of his master's plan. The servant is left speechless after realizing how far in advance Harold has been calculating these moves. A smug expression crosses Harold's face as he notes that Zen is finally beginning to understand. He then turns his focus to Zen's own life, warning him to prepare for a bleak future. Erika remains tucked away in the shadows, her face filled with worry as the conversation continues. Harold beckons Zen to lean in closer, ready to divulge more sensitive details about the family's fate. Clearly unsettled, Zen asks for a clearer explanation regarding the grim warning he just received. Harold reveals his belief that the Stokes family is destined for a major downfall in the near future. As Erika listens, Harold advises Zen to prepare for unemployment by bracing for the worst possible outcome. Zen questions why their revolutionary farming methods cannot be used to prevent their own house's ruin. Harold explains that their systemic issues with taxation and spending make any temporary profit increase futile. The news sends Zen into a frantic state as he wonders about the fate of the common citizens. Closing his eyes, Harold coolly states that Tasku Sumeragi is the key to preventing a disaster. Erika is visibly stunned to hear her father's name linked to the survival of the Stokes territory. Zen remains bewildered, asking how an outsider could possibly intervene in their family's internal affairs. Harold explains that his letter specifically appealed for the citizens' protection should his own family fall. He reveals that Tasku's royal connections will allow him to act as a vital liaison for their people. Harold admits that without this ruthless plan, he could only watch the weak citizens perish. Finishing his story, he issues a dark warning that any leak will result in Zen's disappearance. Wide-eyed and terrified, Zen pledges his absolute silence to appease his intense master. Still concealed in the darkness, Erika remains motionless as the weight of the secret settles. Harold dismissively tells his servant to leave now that their business is concluded. Zen hesitantly asks about Harold's next move, prompting an irritable response from the young noble. Noting that sword training seems unlikely for today, Zen brings up a new topic. The servant confesses with a blush that he has harbored a secret passion for swordsmanship. Harold is visibly shocked to learn that Zen simply wants to watch him swing his blade. He stops to consider the request, a calculating look crossing his face. A mental image of his training regime for swift lightning flashes through his mind. With a sudden shift, Harold agrees to provide a demonstration as a special favor. Zen raises a hand in confusion, sensing that something is slightly off with this invitation. Harold picks up two swords while Zen nervously points out his complete lack of combat experience. Dismissing these concerns, Harold grabs Zen by the back of the neck and calls him hopeless. A sinister grin spreads across Harold's face as he commands Zen to run for his life. Zen screams in realization that he is about to become a live target for training. He begs for mercy as Harold ruthlessly drags him toward the training area. A soft groan echoes from behind the doors, where someone is still hiding. The hallway floor sits empty as the two depart for their session. A door softly clicks shut as the secret meeting finally comes to an end. Erika immediately turns and flees from her hiding spot before she is discovered. Pausing for a brief moment, she stares blankly ahead while processing the truth. The quiet hallway remains still, illuminated only by the flickering light of wall candles. Walking slowly down the corridor, Erika appears lost in a deep and troubling reverie. She comes to a complete halt, her face clouded with doubt and realization. Her mind replays Harold's shocking claim that the villagers are actually safe and alive. Standing motionless, the young lady remains paralyzed by the weight of this information. With a sudden burst of energy, she pivots and begins to run. Tears well up in her eyes as she dashes forward, seeking answers. Outside, the massive estate looms under a bright sky as Erika navigates the interior. Bursting into her private quarters, she frantically calls out for her maid, Yuno. Yuno turns with a bright smile to greet her mistress, oblivious to the distress. Leaning against the doorframe, Erica gasps for air while trying to compose herself. The maid's cheerful expression shifts to confusion as she notices Erica's frantic state. Erica looks up with absolute resolve and declares her intent to confirm the truth. A brief interlude shows a calmer scene where a simple truth is humorously acknowledged. Sitting across from Harold, Erica presents a formal letter from her father. Harold leans over the table and rudely demands the document with a single word. A final comedic moment features a blushing cat girl reacting to the unfolding events. Harold sits up in bed with a gasp, realizing his recent trials were just a dream. Nearby, Erica remains tucked under her floral covers in a deep and peaceful sleep. A mental update confirms that favorable growth is occurring across 6 key harvest locations. Yuno peeks playfully from behind a door, watching the morning activities with a curious grin. Harold considers the progress and expresses his desire to quickly expand the current operation. A sudden, soft thud echoes through the room as someone collapses onto the floor. An enthusiastic associate gestures wildly while pitching a plan for rapid business expansion. Yuno's attempt at a ninja substitution technique fails when she is caught behind a log. Harold loses his patience and demands that the idiotic intruder be tossed out immediately. Turning back to her mistress, Yuno offers gentle words of comfort and unwavering support. A low rumble suddenly vibrates through the air, catching both girls off guard. Erica leans against the windowsill and stares out at the estate with a hollow gaze. The silence is shattered by a long, loud growl coming from a very hungry stomach. A wave of deep embarrassment washes over Erica as her face turns a bright red. The scene shifts to a comedic interlude where Harold acts as a director on set. Erica questions whether the truth about the survivors should be announced to the public. Harold looks away, fearing that his parents will become suspicious if they learn the truth. He crosses his arms and reasons that this deception is necessary for both their futures. A confident smile touches his lips at the thought of the Sumeragis thriving through forestry. Left alone with her thoughts, Erica watches as the path ahead grows increasingly complicated. Harold grips his sword with a confident smirk, looking every bit the capable young master. While the sprawling estate stands quietly under a heavy, overcast sky, Yuno pauses in thought, her expression turning wary as she processes the recent revelations. Nearby, Erica remains focused on the complex logistics involving the distribution of vital antibiotics. The two girls sit together at a long table, acknowledging the impossible speed of the drug's development. Yuno looks away, her brow furrowing as the pieces of the puzzle begin to shift. Erica confirms her suspicions with a soft, trailing response that hangs in the air. A vision of Harold appears, suggesting he may have anticipated the Sumeragi family's crisis years in advance. Clenched fists betray the realization that he seemingly has no personal gain from such altruism. Yuno recalls a quiet image of Harold working tirelessly through the night at his study desk. A nagging feeling that something is fundamentally out of place begins to take root. She remembers how Harold effortlessly detected her presence while she was secretly observing him from afar. The impossibility of him failing to notice an intruder in his own room weighs heavily on her. Erica casts her eyes downward, questioning if his every move was calculated for a specific reason. Yuno considers the possibility that this entire situation was designed merely to provoke her once more. A faint knowing smile touches her lips as Harold's motives become increasingly suspicious with every thought. She acknowledges that the true depth of his fearsome intellect is simply beyond her comprehension. Light glints off the high windows of the mansion as another day begins to unfold. Harold zones out while holding his documents, reflecting on the 3 weeks since he was slapped. Yuno and Erica look back with growing impatience, wondering exactly when their stay will finally conclude. Harold notices the dark circles under his eyes while feeling overwhelmed by his current workload. A sudden knock on the door interrupts his brooding as Norman arrives. He permits the butler to enter while remaining seated in his room. Norman adjusts his glasses and prepares to deliver a message from the master. Harold looks up with a neutral expression to receive the news. The butler notes that Erica's health has finally reached a point of stability. His father sits authoritatively behind a large desk, announcing her return to Sumeragi territory. Though he maintains a smug facade, Harold celebrates his perceived freedom internally. His joy is short-lived as his father commands him to serve as her escort. Harold's face contorts in absolute shock at the unexpected and unwelcome order. He stands trembling in place while desperately searching for a way out. His father insists that showing sincerity is essential for a fiancé of his status. The pressure to win her heart causes Harold to break out in a nervous sweat. His mind races as he deduces the true social motives behind this command. Erica appears looking somber as she prepares for her departure in traditional clothing. Harold feels immense dread about walking into such a social minefield. A sudden spark of inspiration hits him as he reconsiders the situation's potential. He contemplates using this trip to advance his secret agricultural farming methods. The influence of the Sumeragi family presents a unique opportunity for his personal goals. He concludes that this change in plans might actually result in a major success. Harold smirks to himself, realizing he has already played his best card to win over Tasku. He formally accepts the command to depart shortly and begins his mental preparations. His father laughs heartily, misinterpreting the situation as a sign of the pair's growing intimacy. While Harold internally mocks the man's naivety, he maintains a facade of respectful obedience. The view shifts to a peaceful mountain village tucked away in a verdant valley. Sunlight hits the sturdy wooden gates of the Bluische villa as the day unfolds. A lone traveler's foot lands on the dusty road, marking a new arrival in the quiet area. The cloaked stranger approaches a local worker to politely inquire about a specific resident. He explains with a calm demeanor that he has come looking for someone important. With a subtle smile, the traveler asks for the whereabouts of a woman named Clara Ameller. A long shadow falls across the ground as the mystery surrounding the search deepens. Erica listens intently with a concerned expression, her thoughts consumed by Clara and Colette's safety. Harold contemplates the danger of his parents becoming suspicious if the truth is ever revealed. He crosses his arms, determined to ensure his family never finds out they are alive. A plan forms in his mind to ensure the Sumeragi family no longer requires outside support. Erica stands frozen in her colorful attire, visibly shaken by the weight of their secrets. She looks out over the horizon, feeling the immense pressure of the roles they must play. A young boy weeps on the ground while a younger Harold looms over him with a practiced sword. The boy displays a cold and haughty grin, fully embracing his role as a young villain. The focus shifts to the upper exterior of the grand mansion under a bright sky. Juno listens with wide eyes as the details of a mysterious medical breakthrough are revealed. Erica demands confirmation regarding Harold's claims, questioning the physical possibility of his sudden achievement. While sitting together, they conclude that developing a complex drug in days is an impossible feat. Erica turns her gaze away, deducing that Harold must have planned this outcome long ago. She confirms her suspicions that his cold exterior masks a deeply calculated and helpful agenda. They realize Harold likely predicted the Sumeragi family's crisis years before it actually happened. The effort he exerted is highlighted by a vision of him working for an unrelated cause. Erica reflects on the immense amount of time Harold sacrificed while working in total secrecy. She pauses when a specific inconsistency in his behavior catches her keen attention. Juno recalls her own failure to stay hidden from Harold's sharp and perceptive senses. She finds it highly improbable that a skilled fighter like him would miss an intruder. Erica suspects that Harold intentionally staged his private thoughts to be overheard by others. The maid feels a sense of dark excitement contemplating the future schemes he might orchestrate. She admits her growing uncertainty about whether to look forward to his growth or fear it. A knowing smile touches her face as she acknowledges that Harold is a truly terrifying individual. Meanwhile, the midday sun reflects off the polished windows of the Grand Stokes Manor. Harold stands in quiet contemplation, remembering the slap he received from Erica 3 weeks ago. Erica and Juno remain together, wondering how much longer their guests will overstay their welcome. Harold turns his focus toward his next business objective. Prioritizing his search for a new company, he looks toward the heavy doors as a sudden knock prompts him to invite the visitor inside. Harold asks for the reason for the butler's intrusion. The messenger remains formal while relaying the urgent news. Harold's eyes widen as he hears that his father is summoning him. Mention of Erica's worsening health adds a layer of tension to the situation. Lord Stokes sits in his study and reveals that the guests are returning home. Harold feels a sense of relief, thinking he is finally free from her presence. The Lord shatters his peace by stating that Harold will join them on their journey. The young noble is stunned by the command to stay with the Sumeragis for a while. He protests the decision, demanding to know why such an arrangement is necessary. His father emphasizes the importance of showing sincerity to his future wife. Harold cringes at the awkward prospect of trying to win someone's heart. He deduces that his father simply wants to see proof of a stable relationship. Memories of Erica looking distant and melancholy flash through his mind. He feels as though he is being forced to walk straight into a trap. A sudden realization sparks a plan to utilize the trip for his business expansion. He considers the logistics of selling his unique farming method through the family business. Recognizing the Sumeragi family's current struggle, he sees a window of opportunity. Harold commits to the plan, believing he can turn this obstacle into an advantage. His expression hardens with resolve as he identifies this as the optimal choice. He accepts the orders and vows to leave for the distant estate without delay. Lord Stokes laughs with delight, believing the bond between the two families has truly strengthened. Harold maintains a cheerful facade while internally vowing to succeed regardless of his location. The story travels to a distant mountain range where a peaceful village is located. A rustic wooden gate welcomes visitors to the quiet community of Broche Village. A traveler's footsteps echo along the path leading into the heart of the settlement. A working man pauses to wipe his brow as he listens to a stranger's approach. The cloaked figure explains that he has come searching for a specific local resident. He smiles while revealing that he is looking for a woman named Clara Ameller. The current set of events concludes as a message indicates the story will continue. A brief announcement is made requesting assistance to support the ongoing translation efforts. Harold appears in a determined stance as a new chapter concerning secret agents begins. The focus shifts to a remote farmhouse surrounded by open fields and rolling hills. A soft, melodic humming drifts from the yard of the solitary wooden house. A young woman continues her morning routine while placing items into a laundry bucket. She vigorously shakes out a large white sheet before hanging it to dry. With steady movements, she pins the fresh linens onto the long outdoor clothesline. She looks over her shoulder and breathes a sigh of relief after finishing her work. A sudden gust of wind rushes over the landscape, rustling her long skirt. She brushes her hair back and takes a moment to appreciate the cooling breeze. Her expression becomes pensive as she stares out toward the horizon in quiet thought.